issues is not the way for us to get the maximum information on them. And I've argued, you will recall this in the last government, that we should set dedicated time aside every month to deal with the North. And we shouldn't just be dealing with it in the middle of a crisis or when some other difficulty arises. And I thought we had that understanding, so I would ask you again to reflect on that. I want to concentrate my remarks on the North, but just a few broad remarks on the issue of Brexit. And, you know, our problem, and you said this yourself, it isn't that the people of Britain would decide to leave the EU. Of course, we have a self-interest, and there would be a negative effect upon fortunes in this state. But our problem is that the North would be dragged with them. And that would, because of partition, create very, very particular difficulties. I'm sure you agree in your occasional forays north that the physical border is all but invisible, and none of us, downplay the unfinished business that has to be done to remove the economic and the political barriers and deal with the legacy issues. But a return to border controls would be a very, very negative, retrograde step. And I know from my own constituency, and we're actually organising a conference early in June on Brexit, I know that the business people and those in the councils and the chambers of commerce on both sides of the border want maximum cooperation and are trying to find ways to develop that. So the economic and social impact of Brexit along the border counties would be substantial, and for this state, not least in our agricultural industry, but in a whole range of other social and economic matters, would be very significant indeed. I also think it would have an adverse effect on the All-Ireland bodies that are part of the Good Friday Agreement, and I'm just wondering if you had the opportunity to raise these matters with the British Prime Minister, and if you asked him about any of those issues. I spent most of yesterday afternoon in Stormont, and I can tell you that I'm very confident that the Executive will be elected tomorrow, and in fact Sinn Féin will be announcing our nominees for ministerial positions later on today. And you will recall that the Fresh Start negotiations agreed that arrangements would be put in place to facilitate the creation of an opposition in the Assembly. So the SDLP, the Alliance Party and the Unionist Party have decided to do just this, and that's a matter entirely for themselves. I do think it's a pity they didn't tell the voters this during the election. We will recall that the UUP and the SDLP were two lead parties in the government for 9 years, and they made a mess of it. The political institutions were suspended twice, they crouched twice, and they were down for almost 5 years over that 9-year period. And Sinn Féin did not walk away during any of those shenanigans. Instead, we faced up to the challenges. And, I'm a United Irelander. Sinn Féin is a progressive Republican party. We want to see all Ireland governance, but the imperative at the moment is to build partnership, get to know our neighbours, try to remove divisions, and try to move forward and to deliver in quite difficult circumstances for the people in the North and across the island. So let's see how all of this develops. I think sometimes a mistake is made in here where the government's role is defined as having to give support to people in the North, and of course that's part of it, and no one would repudiate that, or any sensible person, particularly anyone who's progressive, would welcome a greater involvement by the Irish government in all of those issues in a strategic and in a sustainable way. But the big job of the Irish government, and I've said this many times, is to engage with the British government. Is yes, to engage with our neighbours in the North on an ongoing, almost invisible way, just as as easy as breathing that we should be dealing with people in that part of the island. But the Good Friday Agreement is an international treaty, and there's a responsibility and obligation on the government here as co-equal guarantor of that agreement to keep the British government to account. And it would be useful if our government was a United Ireland government. I know that's the historical antecedents of the Fine Gael party, but the British government is a unionist government. It makes no bones about that. However, under the terms of the Good Friday Agreement, there is no legal unconditional commitment to the Union. In fact, it can be changed by a majority in the North voting. And that's what I think our government should be doing on bread and butter issues, on economic issues, on legacy issues, on all of the social and economic issues, but also on that big issue. Because clearly partition, 100 years on, does not work. Whatever merit it had for the elites away back in the day when it was imposed on us, the North doesn't have the same importance in the context of the British state as an industrial hinterland and all of the rest of that. So I would commend that approach to you, Taoiseach. I just want to raise another specific issue, and that is that the British government has stated that it will scrap the Human Rights Act 1998. Now, this is crucial. That threat was contained in the Conservative Party manifesto last year. It's a central part of the legislation for the Good Friday Agreement, and human rights activists are deeply concerned about the current status of this threat. There was a consultation to be held. That hasn't been authorised. It hasn't happened. And there has been a whole range of incoherent and flawed arguments from the British government in support of its position. So the British government, under the terms of the Good Friday Agreement, is obliged to deliver, and I quote, the complete incorporation into law of the European Convention of Human Rights. And the Human Rights Act gives this legal effect to the European Convention. So I want to raise that as an issue of grave concern and ask you, what's your up-to-date understanding? When's the last time you spoke to Mr Cameron about this? And if you hadn't done so recently, could you do so and report back to the Dáil at the earliest opportunity? And to conclude, Concordia, in a sentence, what we need from our government is consistent strategic engagement with the British government on all of these issues. Just quiet diplomacy, and also, because it is an international agreement, to be looking to our friends in the international community for support in the implementation of this agreement.
Taoiseach.
Yeah, thanks, Deputy Adams. I'd be very happy to raise the matter again with the British Prime Minister and report back to the Dáil in respect of the human rights issue. As you know, our own Justice Committee here would be known as the Justice, Equality and Human Rights Committee. Obviously, it's an issue of considerable importance to us. I'll advise the House on the point you've raised about the Human Rights Act of 1998 in the Conservative policy document. I think that. We have a debate here tomorrow on the cross-party motion in respect of Dublin Monaghan bombings, and we continue to press the British government for access to papers that have not been provided for all of these years. Deputy Adams would be aware that a couple of years back, when they brought down the relatives and the sole survivor of the Kingsmill killing, that I committed to making available whatever information about that was on Garda files, and while it took quite a long time to actually get that through because of legal complications and so on, that information was transmitted by the Garda personally to the coroner's office, and is now being part of that inquest investigation and analysis. I mean, I haven't seen the evidence. I don't know whether it's going to add one way or the other to the findings, but it was an important signal both to the British government that the Irish government are prepared to make available documentation that was hitherto unknown in respect of that. I think it's important to say that we all recognise the fact that this The Republic here is a co-guarantor of the Good Friday Agreement. And that was repeated time and time again in respect of the agreements in between, and most recently in the Stormont Agreement. I'd say this, Deputy Adams, I think that you have different views about the Brexit referendum in Britain. Some people would say, we think we should be negotiating a better deal. Some people would say, well, if you vote to leave, that they'll have to give you a better deal afterwards. I'd make the point that the legislation here was very clear, Cancora, and the agreement was very clear. And this is a one-off. And if the British people decide to stay, then the changes and the opportunities and the propositions agreed at the European Council will take immediate effect. If they decide to leave, then you're into a very different position of a minimum of 2 years negotiation. And I think here's the point that you may have referred to somewhat obliquely, Deputy Adams. The point is that while the Irish government in a European context would continue to strongly support the value of Britain being a member of the European Union, and would argue for that because there's a stronger union with them in there, you have no idea, Cancora, of what the attitude of European countries would be towards Britain whether to decide to leave. Because they've had agreements since the 70s, and obviously everybody could argue their case up and down. But I couldn't speak for any other country as to how their attitude might be towards Britain were the British electorate to decide to leave. I know that our view would be that the Union would continue to be a stronger Union were Britain to continue to remain a member. But I couldn't speak for other countries in that sense. In respect of the cross-border facilities, Deputy Adams, we agree on this, and we've raised it with the Deputy First Minister on many occasions. The opportunity for us here over the last number of years wasn't that great, given the financial straitjacket that the country was in, to assist in respect of the infrastructure projects, north, south, and all of that. I'd make the point that between here and 2020, Cancora, for the peace and interreg facilities, almost $3 billion will be made available by the European Union towards Northern Ireland. And people oftentimes forget that. They might have a different view about the scale of monies being made available by the US, or the American fund. But there's $3 billion on the table between here and 2020 over the next 4 years for Northern Ireland under the peace and the interreg facilities. And that's an important consideration when you consider that Northern Ireland is still an area coming out of conflict, where you have more peace walls than you've had for many years, and where there are still very fragile communities, particularly in regard to the difficulties that young people find living in those communities. And that's why the Peace Fund and the Interreg Fund was an important consideration of the presidency that we held in the first half of 2013 in negotiating those funds and those monies. And it is true, Deputy Adams, as you're well aware, that were Britain to decide to leave Europe, then Northern Ireland would be the most adversely affected region, probably in the Union. Certainly Ireland would be the country most affected, but Northern Ireland would be particularly severely badly hit. And I think it's for every party to make up their own minds, Cancora. And the DUP have given their view as to why they consider they should be that they should leave. I'm glad that other parties have a different view on that. This is, as Deputy Martin pointed out, possibilities for economic entities on the island of Ireland here, with enhanced opportunities. I have to say that over the last number of years, we brought Deputy First Minister and First Minister at the time, made them welcome in Brussels when we had the presidency, introduced them to trade delegations that were coming here or that we met on abroad, in the sense of promoting the island of Ireland, without any difference of opinion as to companies that were being pursued by the First and Deputy First Minister in whatever country for siting in Northern Ireland in terms of investment and creating jobs. And I hope that we will be able to continue that. So when you reflect on it, this is the 24th of May. It's only just less than a month now, 4 weeks, for a momentous decision, one of the most momentous of the last 50 years, as to whether Britain wants to continue to remain as a strong and central member of the European Union. I hope that they do. And between this and then, we will do everything that we can at Cancórla to encourage our Irish people in Britain to vote to stay, and if by implication or by information the broader electorate get a view on that, I hope that it's a strong result in favour of staying as a member of the European Union. So I'll advise the House in respect of the human rights issue later, Deputy Adams.
Thank you very much, Taoiseach. I'll take two supplementaries very quickly from Deputy Martin and then from yourself, and I have two other members offering. Yeah.
Discussions by a group of officials from North and South of Cancórla took place in December. Further meetings have taken place, and there will be a report provided to the June meeting. In addition, officials from North and South met in Newry in April with a view to dealing with the extent of that review. The government is committed, as I've said before, to the narrow water bridge concept, which has the potential to provide jobs and significant boost in the time ahead. One thing that we have since independence has been the common travel area. That's always applied to Cancórla when Britain and Ireland were either outside the European Union or inside the European Union. This has exceptional benefits for trade and tourism and a lot of other things. But if Britain were to leave and Ireland remain a member of the European Union, we'd have to work very hard, I would think, to keep that common travel area alive, particularly in respect of trade. If it was coming in through here from Europe and then going to Britain, it's an issue. Deputy Martin raised the question there of the benefits if the UK were to leave the European Union. What would happen to Irish people who draw benefits?
Agreement. There's
yes.
application for migrants. So.
Yes. Well, there are two things that would apply there. Social welfare changes could apply in two cases following the EU agreement with Britain. The first of those is the child benefit payable in respect of children of EU migrant workers not living in the same state as their parents could, after 4 years, be index linked to reflect the conditions in the country where the child would live. There's a lot of discussion about that at the European Council, David Martin. And second, access to what they call in-work benefits, which are essentially intended as, if you like, top-up payments for lower-paid workers, could be limited for 4 years for people newly entering the UK labour market, with payments graduated upwards over that period, so they'd start off lower and work upwards. This would not apply to any EU citizen already living in the UK. Now, we've made this point very clearly to the British government in Downing Street about future Irish workers that would travel to Britain, using now the common travel area, but also going back for so many years. I have to say that they are acutely aware of how sensitive this issue is for future Irish workers, in particular Irish workers at Cancórla who might be working in lower paid jobs, because it wouldn't apply in the case of those who would be working at higher levels. But they're acutely aware of it, Deputy Martin, and it means that they're very sensitive to the fact that we would not want any infringement or any loss of current status that lower paid Irish workers would have were that to apply.
That's the end of questions to the Taoiseach. There was, but I'm afraid you have to look up standing orders. We're going on to priority questions. We're going on to questions to the...
where precedence is given to those who have put the questions down. But